I can't gatekeep my recovery anymore. It's doing nothing for anyone for me to hold this back. Let me put it out there. And so then other people can at least read the reality of the situation and then they don't have to feel so alone, as well as their caregivers, so that they also know what it's like from the perspective of the patient.
We're going to take aphasia awareness a step further today. We are talking about aphasia action because awareness without action doesn't move anything forward. My guest today is Judy Cage, and she is a living example of what action looks like. Judy had a stroke in 2019, and she has a wonderful story of resilience and stubbornness, as she would say, and grace for herself and asking for grace from others, but also stick to itiveness. She is a dynamo, and Judy has a book, and we'll tell you more about that at the end of the episode. If you are sitting in the gap right now, that gap between when rehab ended and feeling like there's got to be more to your life, this episode is for you. This is Life Beyond Aphasia. Welcome, Judy Cage, to the show. I would love to share your story with our viewers so that they understand about your survivor journey. How did you have a stroke?
In January of 2019, I had a massive hemorrhagic stroke in which blood had flooded the right side of my brain and then it took out the left side of my body, created paralysis, the left side neglect where I wasn't sure, I didn't realize that my left side existed, double vision, facial droop, and then my arm actually fell out of my shoulder socket, and I had foot drop, and was unable to walk. So I had to learn how to walk again. And lost all sorts of bodily functions and had some massive cognitive issues. So
Wow. That was shocking because you're so young. How could this have happened?
I had it at the age of 39. I'm currently about to turn 47. And I actually have a rare cerebrovascular disease, which is called moya. At the time I was diagnosed, only 3.5 people out of an entire million were diagnosed with it. And it had only been diagnosed, first discovered in Japan around the time I was born. And I had mini strokes from the age of 4. So what happens is your internal carotid will shrink, and since your brain doesn't get enough blood, brain creates these collateral vessels. Now, unfortunately, with these collateral vessels, they have very thin walls, and especially if you have it combined with high blood pressure, which I do have, these walls have the ability to break. So they did, and that's what flooded my brain.
Okay, wow. So you did go back to work,
Yeah.
but you kept your diagnosis hidden. You kept it on the down low. What were you afraid of happening if people knew?
I think because I am a compliance manager at a national commercial mortgage company, I've always had pretty competitive jobs that would be taken advantage of, that it would be, maybe a low hanging fruit that everyone would, maybe look for mistakes more often or say, oh, Judy had this stroke and that's why, the report wasn't done right, or that this was filed incorrectly, and sometimes I'm sending out emails to the entire organization and I didn't want, you know, that to be a bias against me.
When people found out, what changed and what didn't change?
December is when my book came out. And when that did, our marketing people had, discovered and they wanted to celebrate it. And so it became part of it, the corporate newsletter for March. And the thing is, I think I did get occasional looks of curiosity or judgment.
Your journey back to work was fascinating. How you took on these new challenges. Could you share with the audience a few of the things you did to rebuild your thinking? Because you had said that you had cognitive changes after your stroke and you took some steps to work on those. Can you share?
Well, the key things that I had done, of course, were going through acute speech and occupational therapy and, physical therapy. And then I did a round of outpatient before I then decided, yes, I'm going back to work. The my stroke doctor said, okay, I don't recommend that you do, but if you do go back to work, you can work 4 hours a week. And so I did. I returned and I, just continued to do each task that I had done before. Now, some of them were easier and some of them were not. But I think actually just trying to do it, kind of reconnected some neurons. They started firing off and I was able to. One thing that my outpatient speech therapist had me practice was to listen, like have the radio playing in the background as I was like working in an Excel sheet. And that actually was great preparation because it allowed me to remain, like, to fight through the distraction and still be able to focus on the task. That was pretty huge. Other things, I was constantly doing puzzles, Sudoku, which, I understand the theory, but I actually really don't like it. I am regularly working on the New York Times games like, Spelling Bee or Wordle, and just to keep myself sharp.
That's great. You're obviously very motivated and you weren't going to let something like a stroke hold you back from doing what you wanted to do.
Agreed. Agreed. I called myself incredibly stubborn and yes, I couldn't accept the fact that I would lose everything or the life that I was used to and that I worked so hard for.
Let's talk about ableism. And this is a word you use, and I just love it. How would ableism describe some of what you experienced, and what does it look like when you look completely fine on the outside?
Mhm. Oh goodness. Well, if you want to call it lucky, I recovered very well and very quickly, actually. I was able to walk out of McGee Rehabilitation Hospital on March 15th of 2019. So 2 months after the stroke. And you can't really see the droop unless I'm really tired. My speech has come back pretty quickly, etc. So if the people at work, for instance, when they didn't know that I had a stroke, they thought everything was fine, I was perfectly normal, and that maybe I just went on, a short-term vacation, so a leave of absence. And that, of course was not the case. And I think when it comes to ableism, the rest of the world, they just assume that if you look normal, you are normal. That if you have no other signs of, a disability, or, if you don't have slow speech, if you don't have, like a bandage on your head, then they just consider you to be perfectly normal. There was an instance where I was riding on a skylink at the airport, and I there the car was pretty much empty at that point, except my husband and I and this other couple. And we boarded, and I went straight for the seated area and, sat down to try to preserve my energy through the trip, for one, but really because it was necessary, so I didn't fall over, re-injure myself, etc. And, that judgment, it shows up in so many different places in public, at restaurants, etc. Just walking on the street, if I'm walking slowly, I get the and people just, walk around me, without I think ableism is just the assumption that if you look healthy, then you are. And that really takes away from a lot of people that do have invisible illnesses and chronic illnesses.
You said that no single goal defines your recovery. What does that mean to you?
Initially, when I started writing this blog 3 months into the stroke recovery, I had decided to run the Broad Street Run in Philadelphia, which is a 10-mile run. I had never been much of a runner in my life, but I felt as though I needed to prove the stroke wrong, that I needed to accomplish something to say, nah, stroke, you can't stop me from, doing whatever it is, that I put my mind to doing. And I don't even love running. So, but I had decided this. My vascular neurologist had said to me, Judy, don't you think it's a good idea to ask your doctor whether this is a good idea? And he's like, no. He's like, you can run 10 miles, but training for it would make your blood pressure go up and down. It's not a very secure thing for you to do. And so I said, okay, I'll have to find another goal now. I decided to sign up for a professional certificate at Berklee College of Music. That was 4 classes. They were online, but you would have live classes via Zoom. Send in your homework, which was performance stuff, whether it's singing to a track or playing piano. So I did that while I was working and truly enjoyed it. It was, one of these pipe dream, sort of things. And as I realized, you know, I would continue to come up with another goal after that, and another goal after that, and another goal after that. I didn't think that running one race could officially say for myself and to the world that, hey, I'm recovered from this just because I ran this 10 miles. I'm recovered because I can pursue different goals and what it is, to just prove that I can do it, one after the other after the other.
Love it. What a great story. At some point, you shifted from recovering to recovering for something. This is where you shifted your focus from yourself more outward to the world of stroke survivors. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
The one of the most fulfilling and purposeful things that I've been doing has been mentoring other stroke patients as well as their caregivers. I come into the hospital, within a few days to a week before they leave. They see me, they see how recovered I am, and one, it gives them motivation to say, okay, it actually is possible. That level of possibility, of course, differs with the severity of the person's stroke, but they they see it, they say, wow, how is this even possible? 6 months after I had walked in and visited the art studio, and then there was a patient in a wheelchair, and my therapist, Julie, had said, look at Judy, she's completely, look at her, she's this much recovered. She's walking around, and she said, wow, that is great. Thank you. I get to see that this is possible. So that was one thing. But the other thing is that through all of these peer mentee visits, the same questions would arise. When did this come back for you? Of course, the when is subjective, but how did this feel for you? Did you go back to work? What's it like when your family has demands on you? Like how, if they have expectations that everything is just the same, that you can still get it done better than anybody else, like how do you deal with that? You know, and just life questions. And I did not have a resource for myself when I was recovering. And a lot of the books I tried to read books about it, and most of them were very, I guess driven by, whether it's religion or, and I said, I can't gatekeep my recovery anymore. It's doing nothing for anyone for me to hold this back. Let me put it out there. And so then other people can at least read the reality of the situation, and then they don't have to feel so alone, as well as their caregivers, so that they also know what it's like from the perspective of the patient, because the patient could become sad, frustrated, kind of burrow into their shell a bit. I've had parents contact me saying, thank you so much. I understand my son better. And I think, for me, I had no problem sharing the story or what had happened. I wanted to put it out there to be very real about what it's like. And strokes happen so much more than, you realize, and for so many different reasons. And this was a way to make others less isolated and alone, but also it turned out that I also became less isolated and alone by finding this community that could, that I could help, but also other people who have, say written books, or, gone to speak, or motivated others, or recovered from paralysis, etc.
Tell us the name of your book and where to find it.
Absolutely. The book is called Super Survivor. How denial, resistance, and persistence can lead to success and a better life after stroke. And it is available to order through Amazon.
Awesome. Judy, thank you for sharing your story with us today. Your book sounds like an amazing resource for so many families. And what I appreciate is both perspectives about what you went through, and also instructing care partners they so that they understand better what's happening. Because as you've said through this, our time together, many of these challenges are invisible, and what the caregiver or care partner sees on the outside is not necessarily accurate to your experience on the inside.
Absolutely the truth.
Judy said to me off camera that this experience has shown her how beautiful life can be, and what makes her life rich is sharing it with others, sharing her experience, supporting others, giving them information and hope to move forward. This is a great episode, and I hope you'll share it with those in your family and friends to show just one example of how resilience can shine through the darkest of days. And if you're sitting in that gap between where rehab ended, knowing that there's got to be more, knowing that you have more to contribute to this world, we encourage you to check out our Aphasia Strengths Compass. The link is below. Also, grab a copy of Judy's book. The link is in the show notes. Thank you for joining us today on Life Beyond Aphasia. Rehab ends. Life doesn't. Rebuild communication, rebuild connection, rebuild life. This is Life Beyond Aphasia.